Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning into the podcast of
UNITEN IET On Campus.
I'm your host, Hannah.
And I'm your host, Zihan. And today we are with our special guest,
Hafiza,
the president of UNITEN IET Club.
Today's episode is titled Degree in Progress.
Under construction.
And today we will be talking about how university life is not a polished finished product, but instead it is a work site.
Yeah. So in university, we're all here to build something, to build our knowledge, our confidence, and our future. And like any construction site, it may be fast, it may be slow, and sometimes the construction might need to stop. But it doesn't mean that it will be a failure for each of us. It might be a time that we need to give our attention to it.
That's right. That is basically the crux of what we'll be talking today within the theme of construction, building our future as we are pursuing our degree, or for some of you, diploma or foundation. So that is the first introduction of this episode. We'll be moving on to the first segment. Move on to the next segment. We would like to explain a bit about what this IET On Campus podcast is. If we could have Hafiza to introduce us about what this podcast is about, its aims, what it wants to achieve.
well, first of all, thank you, Hannah and Zihan, for having me today as the guest speaker for the first episode of the IET Podcast Series. And currently, we started this initiative in our term because we believe that through the IET Podcast Series, students or even leaders from engineering sectors, lecturers, or even students from other universities can convey their message, can convey their thoughts about our topics respectively, and share our knowledge through the social media, and also to achieve wider viewers, not just nationally, but if possible, we would like to target internationally. Because at the end of the day, we believe that through these podcasts, we can convey to you or share with you what engineering is all about, and not just engineering, but also about the student life itself. So thank you for having me.
We're moving on to the next segment, the first segment. We are going to talk about how university is like a building project. There are blueprints, deadlines. You have to answer to some people, perhaps, expectations, of course. So in that vein, I'd like to ask our guest, in your opinion, why does university life feel more like a construction in progress as opposed to a finished stage of life?
Well, thank you for the interesting question. Well, if we ourselves are currently seeing our own life in the degree life, we would say that sometimes we don't know yet what our direction might be. And hence, that proves to us how degree life is a process where we are not the finished product, but instead it is a journey for all of us to find what we are passionate about. Because a degree is about your life aim or maybe a life path. However, along the way, we would have to figure out what are the things that interest us alongside the degree that we are currently doing. Hence, at the end of the day, we cannot say that the degree life is what makes us complete. But the degree life is the starting point of how we would like to have our life be directed to. Hence, it kind of, at the end of the day, proves to you how degree is not the finished product, but instead the process itself of life.
I suppose it ties into how students shouldn't feel locked in by their degree, how rigidly like this is where they need to continue in life. We don't know how things may turn out. In fact, we're currently building towards that endpoint. What do you think, Tian?
True. I think like every student has their own path, their own different ways to go through in university. So There are ups and downs for each of us, and we have our own personality that we go through, our own techniques, our own skills. So it might be different for each of us.
I agree. So that makes me wonder, and it makes me wonder that is it normal for progress to seem different for each student?
Yes, definitely. Because even through our own eyes, sometimes we can see someone who finishes their work very fast because they can understand very easily in class. Some people have their own journey in leadership, and we believe that oh, we are back or we are behind in leadership just because we saw someone who's more successful. And when we go to social media, we see the student life of other students and we start to compare of their highlights with our daily life. Hence, when we struggle, we start to see how much we lack just because we compare ourselves with the people who show their highlights to you. Hence, when we start to compare these things, we can see how some people believe that they are behind. When at the end of the day, it's not about who did what today, but it's about what you did yourself today compared to yesterday. Because, like how people say, comparison is the killer of joy. But that is a topic for another segment. So, when we're talking about people who become distressed because they believe they are falling behind, maybe someone who took a 1 year gap, or maybe someone who had to repeat subjects. So, when we're talking about these kind of things, this kind of setbacks, the only thing that causes it to be had to be something negative is when you see it as negative. Hence, when you think that you start to fall back compared to others, then you are starting to fall back compared to others because you believe it yourself. And when we're talking about comparing people and we're talking about different journeys, some people believe that the start of their life should be leadership stuff. Some people start with creative stuff. Someone who likes to dance, someone who likes to sing, for example. And these kind of people, sometimes people see them as falling behind just because they pursue their dreams in creativity while having a degree in technical. And when we have different journeys, we start to think that becoming someone else or following other people's direction is what you should do just because you see them highlighting their life in that perspective. Hence, yes, I would say that everyone have their own journey and different speed, but that does not matter because one step ahead is still a progress. Thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm. How about you, Hannah and Zihan? What do you guys think about different speed in terms of life?
That's really interesting to me about how there are different speeds for different people. I have friends who are starting their degree later than perhaps. How old are you?
Oh, currently I'm 20.
20 this year, yes. There are those who are starting later than 20. There are those because of different circumstances in life. And I have friends who are starting earlier because perhaps that's the geniusness that they have. Alhamdulillah for that. So that's really interesting. The idea and the observation that people have different paths and journeys, but somehow we are all still building in the same place in UNITEN. And for those viewing outside of UNITEN, in wherever you are, you're still building your life. And just so happens that you are starting at different stages in your life, but still building.
I totally agree with both Hafiza and Hannah said, because each people has their own capabilities. They might start late, but they understood it more than people that started it early. And as for me, I take my time. As a student, I take my time to digest all the things that I have academically or even in leaderships. So I think every person has their own pace. So it's okay to be moving slow by slow or at your own pace. So since everyone has a different pace.
I agree what you said about how those who might be starting slower understand better.
Yeah.
Because those who start perhaps later have different life experiences that make them understand, perhaps that's, for example, that subject better. So that's really interesting to me too. And I would say that it's good that the progress of each student is different, so that those who are strong can help those who need it. And that is our first segment.
And let's see you on the next segment. So moving on to our second segment, it's about understanding burnout in the building phase. So students currently many experience burnout emotionally, physically, and even mentally. But burnout is sometimes it's not a signal of failure. It might be a sign for you to actually focus on yourself. So, Hafiza, I have a question for you. Can you share a time when you were juggling multiple responsibilities at once and how it affected you?
Well, okay, so to be honest with the viewers and to the host for today, the time that I had the most things happening at once was honestly last semester during the end of 2025. During that time, to be honest with all of you, I had around almost 30 events that either I'm supervising or I'm being a participant or a committee. And when I participate in some events, some of them were like 5 days, which I don't go to class. And that really affected my studies. And during the finals, I was half, how to say, a little bit lost, almost believing that I can't do it. Even I'm just the first year, it was a burdening sem because it was the transition time and a lot of things happen at once, not only regarding clubs, but also regarding university life, student life, personal stuff. And when everything happens at once, you start to believe that you can't handle things because you feel tired and feel sad. So a lot of people, I think, can relate to being tired, being overloaded, being sad, lonely, especially in university where everyone has their own life. Even your friends sometimes have life uh, themselves. So sometimes you will think that you are alone. And when that happens, you start to think that you can't do things just because you feel negative about it or you feel tired. And during my phase, I feel that I was so behind compared to other people. Yes, you see, some people will see everyone be smiling and laughing about. But yes, when things get heavy, of course, people will get sad. And that's actually normal for all of you, for those of you who feel tired or start to procrastinate because you think that you are overloaded. Sometimes when that happens, based on my experience, um, I thought that resting was something that I should not do because I feel like, oh, if I were to rest, it will make me not up to what I have to do because a lot of things are being on my list of the things that I have to settle. So when things are overload, I believe that resting just make it worse in terms of a busy schedule. And to twist that perspective, I learned that resting, even taking a rest of 1 hour or 2 hours in a day, it does not make you fail just because you needed that rest. Because when you take those 2 hours and do something that you love, maybe like for example, Hannah, what do you like to do?
I'll just take a walk.
Take a walk. And you?
I like to doom scroll to TikTok.
You feel TikTok. Okay, so when you do those things that you enjoy, and you do those things for yourself. You start to learn how to balance your responsibilities and also your interests and also your own self. Because last semester, I put my own health and my own enjoyment at the back of my list. So I settle things first. I do everything that I'm obligated to do. And at the end of the day, I'm the one who got tired. But I didn't know how to solve that feeling. And when you are trying to doing things a lot, and at the same time you are tired, the efficiency of the things that you are doing actually become less. And to give you a fun fact, 40 to 60% of university students admit that they have burnt out throughout their studies. So when you start to do things that you at first enjoyed, of course taking a degree is something that you enjoy, right? But when it starts to become a burden or something that you are obligated to do, it becomes harder, and it starts to make you feel like tired doing it. And when you start to feel tired, that is when you know that you need rest. But safe to say, and I think you will agree, that a lot of students believe taking a rest means that they are a failure just because they need that break. Hence, in my opinion and in my experience, the transition between 2025 and to 2026 is that I start to learn to take control of my own time. And no matter how busy I am, I still need to to have those moments where I focus on myself. And I believe that a lot of student leaders out there face the same thing. Some people actually face much worse than this. But I hope that they start to learn that even taking care of themselves is not something of a bad thing to do. How about you guys? Do you believe that taking a rest can help in procrastination, can help throughout burnout, can help through student life?
Yeah, for me, I totally agree that we need to take rest and not push ourselves too much, because me myself, I am someone that pushes myself to the point that it will suddenly drive me crazy. So at some point, I realized that it isn't good for me. So I decided at that time, I decided to take that. Oh, it's okay to not push myself to the end of my limit. I can take my time. I can what we call, I can move at my own pace, where I can study one by one and not like back to back. You understand? Like some people, they push themselves until midnight, until 2, 4 in the morning. But I tried that too, and I realized that that wasn't my study routine. It wasn't for me, because the next day, when I already studied the day before until 3 a.m., but the next day it didn't even give me
You
the
don't
knowledge.
retain. You don't retain the knowledge.
Yes, the knowledge doesn't stays with me, because during my study, during that time, it was supposed to be my sleep time, because I am someone that is, I need the time to sleep to work efficiently. Yes, so that my brain will work efficiently the next day, and I will progress more good progressful. Okay. So how about you, Hannah?
Um, on the topic of burnout and multiple responsibilities, I've been there. I've been there for sure, and I've also seen friends who have been there as well, juggling multiple responsibilities in university, and also added to that their personal life. And they have come to me and they have said how they feel burnout. Simply put, they feel like they can't do it anymore. They feel like this, I'm done. And I personally have felt that way as well. what I understand at that time was that we've been putting ourselves to the output of our energy has been maximum for so long, no breaks, that finally when our gas has run out, we crash. That is what I can see from that. That's not an ideal situation to have as a student, because as we said, it's a construction site. It must go on, even if it's slow, even if there's breaks, it must go on. But burnout can lead to us halting altogether. It's quite dangerous, I'd say. So, an interesting topic, burnout, I'd say.
Yes, it totally relates to us as students, especially.
And that is the end of our second segment, the burnout segment. Our last segment was about burnout and how running on full power for too long, it's not sustainable, which is a very neat segue into our next segment, which is ups, downs, and pauses. So, one thing we don't talk about enough is how in progression, in construction, in building our future, pauses is a very important part of progress. So sometimes we need rest. Sometimes we need to seek help and pause, not stop altogether, but pause and then broaden our horizons, our views, to make sure that perhaps we're on the right track. So this doesn't mean that we're falling behind. It just means that we are recalibrating and we are trying to see what the structure needs and what else we need to top up from there. So, Hafiza, do you believe in taking a break? And do you believe that taking a break will help students to further progress their goals?
Hmm. Okay. So if you're just talking about my experience, that would be boring lah. So let me tell you about this friend of mine who was so burned out to the point he crashed out. He was so tired, so filled with programs, filled with responsibilities. Almost every day he slept for like 3 hours or less. And he was very tired to the point that he decided to take a leave from everything, leave behind around just 3 days. And after that 3 days, he came back so happy, so fulfilled, to the point everything that he does after that were maximized to the best quality that I've ever seen someone work with. Even with all of those things that he juggled, he still can perform because he took those 3 days of rest, which he went hiking. He went to explore the world and do something that he enjoys. And to give you another perspective, someone who's more famous and currently circulating in the social media, our Olympic medalist from US, which is Alicia Liu, who I believe sets a perfect example on how someone should always pause whenever they start to think that what they used to enjoy doing starts to become something that they are obligated to do. So when those things happen, for example, Alicia Liu, she took that leave, retired at 18, if I'm not mistaken, went hiking, went to explore the world, try new things, take on college, and do everything that she loved. And at the end of the day, she came back and won a gold medal because she took those years to actually find herself, and she realized that she actually enjoyed skating. Hence, she came back in in a situation where she wants to do it and she enjoys doing it. And that applies to every one of us, because when we are studying, sometimes we will do it every day, because a degree is consistently around 5 years maybe. And when you do it every day, we cannot deny that some people will start to see it as a routine work. or something that they are obligated to do. Going to class start to become obligation and start to become heavy. When at the start, he or she enjoyed studying. So when those things happen, sometimes you need those 2 days of weekend of free time to do the things you like. And when the day comes back, you have to go back to class. You came back in a way that you want to learn. You start to become passionate again. To find your passion is what you have to do, because if not, you will become much more burnt out. And when you study, you can't, because you start to think how heavy these things are, how hard it is. But if you start to enjoy it, things become different. It's all about perspective. How about you guys? What do you think about this?
I agree, definitely, because sometimes I forget to have fun on the weekends. Perhaps on the weekends, instead of going out with my friends or doing chilled activities, I feel the need, the pressure to study, study, study. Where's the fun in that? Where can I get passion to go back to class on Monday? Like you said, perhaps we should go hiking. Let's all go hiking. Shall we?
We did go to hiking.
We did. The waterfall. Let's show a thumbnail there.
Yes,
The waterfall.
check out our IG. Okay.
Yeah, that was amazing. That weekend, the following week for class, I felt so refreshed. I felt so happy. So
Ooh.
good job, IET, for
Shout out to our program director. give a picture. Okay, so proceed.
So I agree, and I personally, I believe that it is really, really important to do other things than your regular work or studies.
Yes, I agree to both of you. Since having a break makes you more relaxed. It takes your time for yourself to recollect back yourself. Since when we pressure ourselves or like push our capability to the max, it might tire ourselves, and at the end, it will cause to the previous segment that we stated that it will cause us burnout. So we need to take some breaks and focus on ourselves. Or it doesn't mean that you need to take a long break. Even when you study a bit too long, you can just go grab an ice cream, and that's a break too, and go back to studying. It can improve yourself, and it can make you feel better. So that's for me.
That's a very great take.
Yes. I think taking an ice cream or sweets is very good actually when you feel stressed out or burned out, or you feel that everything is on you. Yes.
What's your favorite ice
My
cream?
favorite ice cream. I am basic. I love vanilla ice cream. Yeah.
That's a nice one.
How about you? Well, mine. Oh, specifically for me, Joy, the strawberry ice cream. And I'm craving it right now.
I love
Yeah.
Oreo. Oreo is really nice.
We should have an
Chocolate
ice cream
too.
later.
It's great. So that is the end of our third segment.
Moving on to the next segment.
For the next segment, we'll be talking about invisible struggles, comparison, and pressure. Pushing down on me, pressing down on you, no man asks for. So, to Hafiza, I'm sure you have felt some kind of pressure, perhaps from family, from other peers, and maybe even yourself, of course. So my question is, why do you think that comparing behind the scenes struggles of ourselves is harmful when you compare it to highlights of other people's lives? Why do you think it's harmful?
Well, I think the first thing is comparing yourself to other people is unfair, because people have different geographical background. People have different experience, different way of being different ways of handling things. And when we start to compare these kind of things, I think it's unfair, because at the end of the day, no matter how much you compare with other people, sometimes you compare yourself with their highlights, because a lot of people hide their own vulnerability. People hide their feeling of being less, because everyone is afraid to show themselves as vulnerable. Whenever they show their weakness, they believe that that will make them less, I think, less efficient, or when being compared to other people. So when people start to compare this kind of things, I think is unfair. And also, the biggest thing regarding all of this topic is pressure. As you stated, I think for me, the biggest pressure that I have, I think, comes from my own self, because uh because it would be lie a lie if I were to deny that sometimes when I look at people, of course I would want to be like them. For example, if I'm leading, for example, of course I will look up to people who are also leaders, who have been where I've been and trying to achieve what they have achieved, because those are my role models. So I think it's a healthy comparison when you put pressure on yourself to become better by comparing yourself with people who you respect. But it starts to become unhealthy when you start to put so much pressure on yourself to the point it becomes negative talk. For example, you push yourself and then you start to say, "Oh, I'm tired. I am sad. I am slow. I am dumb. I can't do this," and stuff. Even when those are just a short confession, a moment of confession. When those things repeat, you start to believe it yourself, because that is how your brain psychology works. When you start repeating things, you start to believe in it, and it starts to become your reality because you believe in it. No one can change your perspective. No matter how much you compare to other people, if it's become negative, it's because of you. So the thing that you can do, the thing that you can do to overcome this is, instead of saying negative things, you start to say, "I need rest." Instead of "I'm tired." Or instead of "I'm sad," you can say, "I need a break." If you think you're slow, you can say, "I need more time." When you think you're dumb, you just need to say, "I need to study more." So when you start to turn those negative thoughts into actions, something that you can do, you start to look forward to the next thing that you can do. Hence, it becomes a positive perspective. And I believe that when you have those positive perspective, it becomes a journey that you enjoy instead of pressure that break you down. How about you guys?
It's very interesting how you say it's all about perspective. So it makes me wonder, how do you know if you are comparing yourself in a constructive way versus self-flagellation, let's say? Is the difference that big, that obvious, because like you could say, you compare, for example, I would compare myself to you, how okay, you run faster than me, I run slow, I run so slow, like that. And so where does the difference lie in between comparing myself in a bad way versus in how I might take inspiration from you? Where does the difference lie?
Well, Hannah, the difference is very thin, to the point that people sometimes don't even realize how negative these pressure starts to affect them. And that happens to so many students, to the point it affects them without them even realizing. So, how to differentiate is by having these reflection moments where you sit down, think about what you're thinking, sit in your thoughts, and start to think either the pressure that you have right now can build you or break you down. So, in these reflective moments is when you decide either these things are good for you or bad for you. And of course, people will say, "Oh, we should just compare because at the end of the day, it helps them to improve." But how much does it cost you in terms of emotionally, mentally? how much can it turn you into a robotic something that just wants to consistently be something greater, but at the end of the day, you lose yourself in the process. So when you think that way, you start to see how much you can gain in a much broader direction instead of just one thing that you want, just by having these reflection moments. And I would like to say that humans are like gears. When you put pressure on yourself, for example, you start to think negative and you start to do something that emits negative things. So, as we are engineering students, comparing ourselves to gears would be a very great metaphor. Because, for example, if I'm currently the first gear, I have two choices, either to move you into positivity or either to bring you into negativity. So, I think this also affects when you are being someone who can either spread positivity or spread negativity. That's a choice that you always do every day. So imagine if you today decide to think positive, you start to share it with others, and other people start to become positive. And how far can that positivity go in terms of making things better for student life as a whole? So I think that is one of the ways to overcome. You yourself become someone who you hope can be for you. A positive mind, a positive thought, a positive voice. How about you, Hannah and Zihan? What do you think about this?
How do you, Zihan? How would you strategize a way to bring more positivity from perhaps the pressure or comparison? How would you bring more positivity to that?
Mm,
A positive way to cope, perhaps, yeah.
a positive way. I think the mindset is the first thing I would do, because at times that when we feel sad or when we are moving to negativity, we need some motivations. I often seek for help from people, from my friends, when I'm feeling down and it drags my emotions. So I tell my friends that, oh, I'm having a hard time right now. My study is not consistent. So the words of motivation that they give me really calms me down, and it moves me to a more positive side, where someone told me that my marks doesn't define who I am actually. Even though I'm pushing, like, I didn't get the greatest marks that I should have gotten, but someone told me that, oh, your marks doesn't define who you are, Zihan. You're actually doing great. You're in your progress. So that really moves me to a more positive side. So
That's really, really nice. I agree. How your friend
yes,
might have said how you have come a long way, something like that, right?
Yes.
You've made so much progress. That's also really important for us to look back on our journey and see how much we've already achieved, actually, how much progress we've already made in the topic of construction, how much of the building we have successfully erected. It might still be in progress. It's not finished yet, of course. But look at the foundation that you've created. Look at perhaps the friends that you've made along the way. So that's a really a good thing to look back on, to make sure that we do not fall too hard in our progress and our degree.
and that concludes our last segment.
And thank you again for tuning in to UNITEN IET On Campus. It's been Hannah.
It's Zihan.
And Nurul Hafika. It's been UNITEN IET On Campus. Thank you and see you next episode.
Bye.